Hi. We're in chapter 3 now of Christianity and the Social Crisis by Walter Rauschenbusch. This chapter is entitled The Social Impetus of Primitive Christianity. To what extent were the social aims of Jesus seized and carried out by the church, which called itself by his name? Did his early followers have the same all-embracing and lofty conceptions of the kingdom of God, the same passionate love for justice, and the same humane tenderness and brotherly freedom which make the soul of Jesus the luminous center of our moral and spiritual world? It would be miraculous if they had. What hand and brain went ever paired? There is a gap even between the ideal cherished by any lofty mind and the realization which he can give to it in his own action. There are few men who maintained their first love unchilled to their colder age, and their early purposes untarnished by policy and concession to things as they are. But as soon as the thoughts of a great spiritual leader pass to others and form the animating principle of a party or school or sect, there is an inevitable drop. The disciples cannot keep pace with the sweep of the master. They flutter where he soared. They coarsen and materialize his dreams. They put their trust in forms and organization where he dared to trust in the Spirit. They repeat his words, but they make mere formulas of his prophetic figures of speech. They may join the order of St. Francis, but they will not call the birds their sisters and the sun their brother. Be like Brother Elias becomes the head of the little brothers, whom the poet Saint of Assisi called out to serve the Lady Poverty. That is the tragedy of all who lead. The farther they are in advance of their times, the more will they be misunderstood and misrepresented by the very men who swear by their name and strive to enforce their ideas and aims. If the followers of Jesus had preserved his thought and spirit without leakage, evaporation, or adulteration, it would be a fact unique in history. But they did not. Few held fast his spiritual liberty. The Jewish Christians remained in some measure of servility to the old law. The Gentile Christians early fashioned a new law and obeyed it in the old spirit of legalism. Few rose to his conception of worshiping God simply by a reverent and loving life. The church early developed Christian sacraments and superstitious rites with which to placate and appease the Father of Jesus. Few made his conceptions of the right human life their inward possession. Imagine Jesus with the dust of Galilee on his sandals coming into the church of St. Sophia in Constantinople in the 5th century, listening to dizzy doctrinal definitions about the relation of the divine and the human in his nature, watching the priest performing the gorgeous acts of worship, reciting long and set prayers, and offering his own mystical body as a renewed sacrifice to their God. Has anyone ever been misunderstood as Jesus has? If the religious and moral thoughts and aims of Jesus were thus paralyzed and distorted from the outset, we may take it for granted as a matter of course that his social aims and ideas suffered a similar diminution in scope, force, and purity. If, on the other hand, we should find that primitive Christianity was still inspired by high social aims and still instinct with social energy, it would furnish an added argument of the highest significance for the strength of the social impetus originally imparted by Jesus and inherent in the historical movement inaugurated by him. Well, one could easily get the impression from these few paragraphs that Rauschenbusch thought the church went off the rails pretty seriously and pretty fast. But there is another side to it, one that's, after all, Rauschenbusch is a Baptist, so he sees history somewhat differently than the older denominations. And Rodney Stark is one of those. Rodney Stark wrote a book called The Rise of Christianity, and he showed that the social value of Christianity was recognized very early on by the Roman Empire itself. And I wanted to put a link to that video, first of 2 or 3 that we did, on the response of Christianity in the 3rd century to the pandemic that broke out, the plague that decimated the Roman Empire in the middle of the 3rd century, and even earlier than that. The Christian response to it. So here's the first of that series by Rodney Stark, The Rise of Christianity. And next time, the limits of our information about Jesus and the apostles.